Welcome to Corpse Club, the official podcast of DailyDead.com. I'm one of your co-hosts, Jonathan James, and I am joined today by Bryan Christopher, Derek Anderson, and a live virtual audience. We're doing something a little bit different this time. We just had our Alien Day, Alien Resurrection watch party. Thanks to Bryan, who had the wonderful idea to do it. We had a great time with everybody, and I said, well, let's just keep recording because we had to record today anyway. I'm going out of town, and as people may know, we record like a couple days before it's released. Part of it is so that we can keep things fresh. Another reason is because we run out of time, or it takes a little bit for us to see things because it's one of those things where I want to talk about something without spoiling it for somebody else. And we try to get good. We understand that with the way, especially during the pandemic and the way that movies are, you can't see everything at the same time. But the three of us have seen Evil Dead Rise. So we are going to be talking about all kinds of Evil Dead Rise spoilers. And I know for some of the people that we have on the Twitch stream, you'll be like, oh no, like I haven't seen that. We're going to talk about some other things first so that either way you can hang out. And so we're going to talk about Renfield because Bryan had seen it. I'm going to talk about Dead Island 2 because I've played a little bit of it. And then we'll get into Evil Dead Rise. And so, Bryan, we missed you. And
I missed you all
we
too.
didn't get to
Yeah, it's
have
been a
you at
bit.
the Overlook Film Festival. And you need to go back next year and everybody else who's listening because it's awesome. So Derek and I talked about Renfield, but Derek, you didn't even see it at Overlook either. I could see his face because his flight was a little late, and then your choice of where to go was a little bit was I was a gamble. It was either go to one theater where there's Nicolas Cage or go to the other theater where there's not Nicolas Cage. So you made the right like wager, but it didn't work out anyway. But
It,
you saw it, and we
it's
talked about it.
yeah, and I ended up at the Vampire Cafe that night, so I still had a sort of a vampiric experience. It just wasn't the one I was expecting.
Yeah, and you can never recreate that. So there's that. But anyway, but we've already talked about it. So Bryan, what did you think about Renfield?
I loved it. It was so much fun. It was everything I wanted it to be based off of the trailers, and that's hard to do. Like usually if a movie suffers for me, it suffers from my own heightened expectations or like what I wanted it to be. And Renfield was one of those movies where like I liked the idea of it when I first heard about it. Like I like this idea of this like weird toxic relationship between Renfield and his master. I love that they cast Nicholas Hoult in the Renfield character. I love the idea of Nicolas Cage as the Dracula character. So I was already kind of getting jazzed about it when I was just hearing the tidbits about it. And so then with the trailers, seeing how kind of like playful it was, and seeing how gory it was going to be, again, I was like, man, this is really promising. I hope it's able to deliver on that promise, and it fully did. It's such a charming movie, and like it's heartfelt, it is funny, it is super gory. Like in some ways I feel like they find a way to have their cake and eat it too, where there's these like real emotional stakes, but then they kind of have a little bit of like a Deus ex Dracula at the end with some of the characters, in terms of how they're able to be brought back. But no, I love this. Yeah, I don't really, honestly, no notes. Like it's, and not in that way where it's like I'm going to say that this is one of the best movies that were ever made, but for what it is and what they were presenting, like I thought they stuck it through and stuck the landing on it too. I really had a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, this is a movie that knew exactly what it wanted to be. It might not be for everybody, but like they knew they had the hard R rating. They knew they were gonna have as much gore and as much fun with it as they wanted to, and they knew it wouldn't be for everybody. Unfortunately, like I said, it just as Derek and I had talked about, it just didn't do that well at the box office, which is always sad because you want people who are involved in it to keep, doing more projects. And hopefully everybody still will. But like I said, this one was great. We had a lot of fun with it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it reminded me a lot of Kick-Ass in that it really blended comedy and like high stakes action together really well in a very gory way. And I feel like it's just a movie like I hadn't seen a movie made like this in a while, where it just was so confident, even though it wasn't going to be necessarily like what everyone expected it to be. But I was really pleasantly surprised that they went like as hard as they did in that direction that they did go. And I thought the chemistry of the cast was great too. I thought it was really well made movie. I just hope it finds more of an audience in the years to come, and that it kind of gets that like cult home video status. So
And I think it will.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those things where, again, I compared it before to like John Carpenter's The Thing, and it's not like it's nothing like The Thing, but like The Thing wasn't a big hit in theaters. It found its audience. This is a movie that it's going to be on Peacock or Netflix or whatever the next streaming service is 10 years from now, and everyone's going to love it. There's going to be special editions and all kinds of stuff. This is just a good one. So if you haven't had a chance to see it, I suggest it.
And judging by the box office numbers, you haven't.
You know what it was though? And here's what I said. Sometimes people underestimate the number of horror fans that are out there, and that's why some of these movies have big budgets. You need to get in people who wouldn't ordinarily see it, and that's what made this movie a little challenging there. But I mean, it costs like 60 million to make, which is different. Like the Pope's Exorcist only costs like 15 or 20 million. So when it makes that much, it's like, oh, the Pope's Exorcist, we're doing a sequel. But it's just a math game at that point. And a lot of horror fans got to check out free screenings. I saw a lot of people on my social feed who were like, hey, I saw this early and you should see it. But sometimes you got to get, mom and dad, or you got to get, a ton of teens to go see it. And this was R-rated. So it's not like you got the like viral like sensation that was Megan, where everyone's just going because of that dance. That's only for 5 seconds of the movie. But Megan was legitimately good. And we'll see a sequel for that.
I also didn't realize, I was reading somewhere that this is apparently the first studio movie that Nicolas Cage has done in like 10 years or something.
Yeah, that's true.
Since Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance, I believe, which I also had a lot of fun with that movie. And I remember that one was not well received at the time of its release. So maybe there's so many Cage movies we need to reevaluate, I think. But it was fun to see
Renfield while you can.
Yeah, absolutely. Most definitely.
Yeah. And I did want to talk about I might have said Dead Rising when I said it before, but it's Dead Island. It's definitely Dead Island. Why?
I remember Dead Island. I think it was Dead Island.
I think you got it right.
Yeah, but right now I was thinking Dead Rising because Dead Rising's a good game. This is the worst. Dead Rising. If you haven't played Dead Rising, like Dead Rising's great, especially the first one. I don't know if they've remastered it. They hopefully will one day, but like it's Dawn of the Dead. I think they got sued by Romero's producer because it is.
That's just the one where you're just in a mall and just picking up whatever you can.
And you just have like 24 hours to survive. Yeah. It's great. And then at the height of zombie mania, as I'll call it, Dead Island came out. And so, The Walking Dead was doing well. We had World War Z. We had zombie everything. And Dead Island made a big splash because it had this very emotional trailer where I think like a family was getting separated and there were zombies. I don't even remember all of it, but I remember like it went viral. Just a Trump. You're like, oh my God, like if this is what the cinematic is, imagine what we'll do in the game. And then the game is basically like Dead Rising in first person, where you get a machete, you electrify it, and you just chop up zombies. And so that was a little bit of a disconnect there. That being said, at the height of zombie mania, there weren't a lot of games that let you do that. And there were not a lot of games that had melee combat. A lot of them were shooting only. And so nowadays there's all kinds of different games where it's like, well, you only have a machete, or like in Horizon Zero Dawn, you have a bow and arrow. So like there are a lot of games lately where they're like, we're not going to give you a gun, or if we do, you can only use it sparingly. But Dead Island, like I said, so in that way, Dead Island, the first one was a lot of fun because you're at this resort and you can just like mix different weapons and kill zombies. It's been a long time coming. Dead Island 2 came out. I had a chance to play a preview build. I mean, it is the final version. I did not finish the game start to finish, so I wanted to say that ahead of time that I did just preview it because I don't have enough time these days to dedicate 30 hours to a game. It's sad. I wish I did. But I put maybe 5 to 10 hours in, and it looks gorgeous. It's been designed for next gen systems. You're in Los Angeles or a version of Los Angeles, and you pick between some different characters, and you start, trying to find a way out. You are immune. They have some immunity, and it's in the first Dead Island as well. But if you get bit, it doesn't kill you. Kind of explains how you can get injured. And really, this game is about coming up with creative ways to kill zombies in mass. For people who haven't played the first Dead Island or are looking for something to just kill time, bash zombies, and just have fun, kind of like mindless FPS. Like, this is it. This is good. And it looks great. It plays well. It feels good when you play it. What I mean about that is, like, sometimes you can, it gets, especially with, especially if it's not a huge studio game. I'd say this is like a medium to large game in terms of budget. Sometimes it shows its wear in terms of just being able to kind of move around. Some of the bugs that a big game like this will present itself. This game didn't really have them. This was a really polished game. So to its credit, it's super polished. I would say the role playing is not super deep. So go into this and say, I'm not here for like deep role playing in terms of like what choices I want to make and how I'm, living in the zombie apocalypse. It really is, what kind of cool ways can I come up with to kill zombies? How you can, you get an electric machete, and then if they walk on water, you can like electrify the water with your machete and like lure them. And there's like all kinds of different things you can do. You can blow them up and chop them up, and you have samurai swords. You can chop them up a little easier. Your weapons break. So I would definitely say, for people who are looking for something like that, definitely pick it up. I had fun with it.
So it's not so much choose your own adventure as it is choose your own zombie killing mechanism.
Yeah, for sure. And people like different things. These days, I'm looking for a little bit deeper role play. Personally, I just, I want the best of both worlds. I want a 10 to 20 hour game with deep role playing. I can't play The Witcher at 200 hours or Dragon Age like I used to, or Baldur's Gate. I just don't have the time. So I like, I really liked Resident Evil Village. It was the right amount of time for me. But yeah, so it was good. And I think they said already they had like 1 million or 2 million people picked up the game. So it seems to be pretty popular.
Fun.
It has a co-op mode. You know what I would say? This is would be good for anybody who likes Borderlands. I think you could do co-op, and in a similar way where you could just have fun with your friend and just, bash zombies and get some collectibles for your character. I think Borderlands is something I'd kind of equate this to.
Oh, interesting. It's funny because I remember Dead Island Epidemic all the way back in 2014 was like one of the first like feature assignments I had at Daily Dead was doing impressions for that game. And that video game was more of like a spin-off that was a little more Diablo style, where you're like running around, the camera's pulled up a little bit, so you're kind of looking down at like your 4 characters, you're working together and that kind of thing. But it was a lot of fun though. I loved kind of that tropical Living Dead experience. And I do remember that cinematic trailer for the first Dead Island and how it really like it felt like a game changer when that first came out. So it's kind of fun to see it after all these years, like Dead Island's back, and it's, I think we've, there's been a little, some people might have zombie fatigue just because there's been a lot of zombie content over the last 15 years, but I think there's always fun ways to reinvent it and come back to it. And there's look at The Last of Us.
I was just gonna say, yeah,
a little bit, so
yeah, exactly.
I think it's not going anywhere. It's just a matter of perspective.
Yeah. Speaking of, on the topic of gaming and Last of Us, I know Brian and we'll get to Evil Dead Rise in a second, because it's one of those things where, like, if you listen to us every week, you get like different perspectives. So I've talked about Last of Us, Derek has, but I don't know what you thought.
Because we're all staggered. Like, and we've definitely talked, like Derek and I talked about, because I think when Derek and I talked, I was on like episode 3 or 4. So at this point, I finally caught up with everything. And damn, that is one great season of television. That is a show that is devoted to pushing things forward, not having any filler, and absolutely finding ways to obliterate you in different ways every single episode. The the season finale and the way, have we talked about this in a spoilery way yet in previous discussions, or should we keep this non-spoilery stuff?
Because we have some people listening in that may not have seen it, we should
Yeah.
avoid spoilers.
I will say, like, in a harrowing season, and one that makes you think about what makes a decision right, what makes a decision wrong, how you can understand why someone would make a wrong decision. Like, the way the finale winds up, and the decision that Joel makes in terms of like the good of the most, or the, you know, the many versus the needs of the few, and the path he decides to take is such a combination of like tragic, understandable, and absolutely horrific.
Yeah.
And I you know, if we're not going spoilers, I can't get much into it beyond that, but it's so well done. And the way they have him react and act after the words, and kind of how he tries to, like, in real time and externally try and like rationalize it, and to overcompensate for it in his relationship with Bella, with Ellie, is just so well done. And Pedro Pascal is just quickly becoming one of my favorite actors today because of the way he's able to navigate that. And I cannot wait for what season 2 has in store.
Christy and I are a house divided on that finale. We each would have taken different paths. I won't say anything. I'll just say, yeah.
I understand both. I
Yeah.
understand both.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I
It's-
understand.
yeah.
I understand both as a moral quandary. I don't think there was any way that Joel would have reacted other than the way he did, given his life experience.
Yeah, I think this definitely, like, these feel like human flawed characters. I think what they do a great job saying that, hey, if you, and I mentioned this with Derek, that, you know, Walking Dead certainly is the blueprint for how to do a zombie drama. And the show owes a lot to it, because Walking Dead was first, opened a lot of doors, see, practical effects, how much gore you could show on television. But Last of Us shows that you don't need that many zombies to bring in the audience. You just need characters that people care about, that feel real, whether it's your main characters or whether it's your guest characters. Yeah, it's good stuff.
And they still have fun with the zombies, and I think it's episode 5 where you get to see some of the different types of zombies that they have, and the sinkhole and everything that comes out of it.
Yeah.
Where it gets a little more Resident Evil as far as like the different tiers of zombies.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's and as having played the game like right before watching the show, it's amazing how many scenes were like shot for shot from the game. So it's really cool how they were able to collaborate with like Neil Druckmann, and when they were adapting it to like, okay, obviously a lot of the game worked, so let's not even really change some of that, but rather just flesh it out a little bit, but not to the point where it feels like filler either. Like it's still a very tight story, but it's using what worked in the game and then expanding on it when it makes sense to expand on it. So I was really, really pleased with that. And I kind of want to play the video game. I want to play part 2 before watching the second season, just because that seemed to work out well the first go around. But
you got a little time.
I'm also like scared to jump in because it's so traumatizing.
Yeah. No, you got a little time though. And I would say for people that are looking for more zombie shows, and I'm going to keep promoting it, is the Resident Evil TV show. So many people slept on the Netflix show, and then they canceled after one season. Lance Reddick, who passed away is just recently. He is incredible in this show. He even said recently that it was kind of the one thing he wished he could kind of go back to, because he had so much fun playing that character. So if you haven't seen it, that show's incredible. It takes obviously the zombie stuff to a completely different direction, but I would argue it is the most Resident Evil out of any of the Resident Evil live action attempts. So yeah, if you haven't seen it, check it out. We have, as I had mentioned to our listeners, but if you're looking at us, we're live on our Daily Dead Twitch, and if you're watching us on Twitch, feel free to comment or ask any questions. I'll keep an eye here, and we'll jump in and throw those in. We have a second. If not, no worries. We are moving on to talk about Evil Dead Rise, and I'm giving everybody a second because we're going to talk Evil Dead Rise spoilers, and so I don't want to spoil it for anyone. We're going to talk first, just very high level. What did we each think about it? So the usual format, and then we will talk in more detail because I feel like this is one of those movies where we have to. So we'll start with Derek, I already talked to you a little bit about it. So Bryan, very high level, like 30 seconds. What did you think of the film?
Solid bloody entry. I think this is a movie that's all about, you don't have to completely reinvent the wheel and do something way out of bounds of what has been established before, but you can still do things to make it your own and make it entertaining and make it fresh and not feel like it's just kind of rehashed, like regurgitated versions of what's been before. There's stuff that's very familiar about this, but there is stuff that breathes new unlife into it because it is it's a lot of fun, and it's weird to like a good Evil Dead movie. It's a lot of fun while also being incredibly mean, and that's a very tricky tightrope to walk. And I think like the Sam Raimi versions and the remake, the 2013 remake after it, I think they pull off. I think Lee Cronin does a good job at pulling that off.
And then Derek, how about you?
Yeah, agreed on all fronts with Bryan on that. I think it's in a way, a very contained Evil Dead movie. Even going out of the cabin, I almost expected it to be a little more expanded, but I didn't mind that it was set up the way it was. I thought they were really inventive with playing with the new environment. I thought it did the perfect walk the tightrope of paying homage to the previous films while totally doing its own thing. Everything from the opening drone shot to just the new environment. I think Lee Cronin knew exactly what he was doing. I thought the actors' chemistry was phenomenal. The performances were all out. And it was also way more mean-spirited than I expected it to be. I don't know if it's quite the 2013 level in that department, but it is very dark, while also like sprinkling in that trademark like Army of Darkness Evil Dead 2 humor. So I loved it. I thought it was kind of exactly what the franchise needed. Not that I don't think it's really had a bad one in the bunch. So but it was I thought really, really unique and cool. So really liked it.
Yeah, I agree with the both of you. It's amazing that this franchise has been able to have so many high quality entries. Plus, the TV show is solid, and so it's hard to argue that there's anything, even if it doesn't work completely. Some of the films or the TV show, even if you say, "Hey, this one doesn't completely work for me," it's hard to say that there is a bad entry. Although I'm sure there are people who do. But yeah, I had a lot of fun with this one. I have some things that I want to talk about in more detail, but we'll do that in a second. Just as a final warning, we're going to get into some spoilers, and we'll get into a lot of spoilers as we talk through this. I think one of the cool things about this is that Lee Cronin was not. He did not have to worry about tying himself to the other Evil Dead films. So it's interesting that this is in the spirit of Evil Dead, while this is kind kind of his own thing. And so we have this new Necronomicon, we have this new location, and I think that's great for a filmmaker who's trying to tread new ground. For Fede Alvarez, I think it was one of those things where he was trying to make something that was very much a remake of the first and second film, and he wanted to put his own spin on that. So there were certain things that he kind of had to do, and I mean, he has to be at the cabin. And it's nice that even just a slight change of setting, I say slight because they're still confined, makes this movie feel fresh. We have different characters, and so it's kind of cool that he had the freedom to do this. And even with that freedom of the new location, new characters, it still very much feels like something that was inspired by Raimi. What did you guys think? I guess talking about it in a little bit more details, we kind of break things down. What did you guys think of the kind of the initial setup, which is that they, discover this Necronomicon in the basement, they find the record, and things kind of go downhill from there.
I kind of love this because for me, it initiates this idea that there's more than one Necronomicon. So I'm not necessarily, and I don't know how you two see this in terms of like, is this just like an alternate universe Evil Dead where like there is the events of the cabin didn't happen and it's all happening here? I'm seeing it as the events of like, this is within the Evil Dead universe. There are Deadites. The stuff that happened in the cabin has happened at the cabin. This is someone stumbled on another version of the Necronomicon. I think they even say there's 3 volumes. I think at one point, like in the recording, they say that.
Yes, you're right. And so there is some backstory confirmed by Lee Cronin. If you look at Army of Darkness, there are 3 Necronomicons. So there may be more than 3, but the idea was there are 3 Necronomicons. 3, yeah. So he says one is Raimi's, one is Fede's, and one is his. And so that was kind of his idea. So yes, all of them exist in this world. And so all these things are kind of going on, but in different ways to different people.
And yeah, I like the idea that we have an opportunity to do this in a different spot. The idea that we are in an urban setting, but they do a good job at laying the groundwork for how you can still feel isolated. And in a way, it's almost worse because they offer that like you're just out of reach of help. They have certain scenes where they're trying to yell out the window and nobody can hear them, or like they get down to the parking garage and they're still not out of trouble. So it's like they do a good job at making that feasible too. It's not like there's not a lot of beyond the fact that you need to suspend disbelief that there's such a thing as a Necronomicon and it can release these Kandarian demons. There's not a sense of suspension of disbelief about like, how are they not able to get out of this situation more easily?
Yeah, and I will say, just as a Easter egg, that when they're listening to the recording, that one of the voices is Bruce Campbell. Lee Cronin,
so he is in it.
Yeah, Lee Cronin also said that that may be Ash, or that the idea was that they may be playing with something like that. So that voice was in the past. So he is kind of very aware of, like I said, of how his movie kind of fits in, not only how it fits in now, but maybe how it may fit in the future or the past. Because a lot of people don't talk about it, but like there's a lot of time traveling throughout Evil Dead, including more in the TV show. So there is time hopping.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I love how they set it up. I think it definitely, in my mind, it kind of confirms that this is all a shared universe. I mean, there might be, like you said, some time hopping there, that those universes are a little malleable, but I feel like it definitely kind of is kind of like, hey, this is what's happening in this corner of this shared universe. And I love too that they kind of have the backstory of like the building being an old bank and how like it's in this vault. So obviously it wasn't just like randomly there. It was someone was trying to protect this book and make it so no one would ever be able to open it. And I think just the whole way they discover it and like everything that's hanging from the ceiling, and just it really adds to the atmosphere, the ominous atmosphere of this very kind of like rundown, very like almost like morbid kind of cinematography that they're going for with this building that's on the verge of being demolished. I thought it fit in really well, and it all kind of clicked into place, and it was like, oh, okay, so that's how you get like a Book of the Dead in a high rise. It works. So and of course you still had that kind of that wraparound story at the beginning where you kind of were paying homage to the cabin. So like for people that maybe wanted to kind of ease into it, it wasn't such like a shock that, you know, oh, this is totally different. It was kind of like very playfully going into that and connecting the whole different settings. So I liked how they did that.
Yeah, and I really like this cast. I like the cast. I like the characters. I think they did a great job of bringing you right into things where we meet Beth, played by Lily Sullivan. She quickly gets over to this high rise where there's Ellie, played by Alyssa Sutherland, and her children, and things don't what do you call it? Even without the demonic elements, things aren't really going well when Beth shows up, and I think that it's kind of interesting that they're at odds in the beginning, and it seems like the demons kind of play with that and amp that up, and use that to their advantage. One of the things I really like about these demons, and I've mentioned in the past, is that they are confident. They're like, we're gonna get you by dead by dawn. Like, we're gonna get you. And so it kind of even explains away, which most movies can't, why they're just playing with them. It's like, why don't you just kill them instead of doing this, instead of trying to scare? But no, the idea is to torture your victim until until the very end. And they do that with both or with the kids, but also with Ellie. Even as the mom, you can see that they really torture her as they turn her into this demon and then send her after her own kids.
Yeah, there's a few things I appreciate about that. The characters, I agree, are very different from the ones that you get in previous entries, like especially as opposed to the Sam Raimi protagonists, who are kind of like these soft suburbanite people who like have to pull it together to kind of be able to survive. These are people who are already like, these are already fighters. Like, these are already scrappy people who life is kind of like kicking their ass before they ever meet their first demon. I really like that this is a different kind of character. And going back to the point about like what they kind of do to Ellie, I also appreciate the fact that they found a way to kind of let go of like the possession factor from the both the first Evil Dead and the remake. They both kind of incorporates the sexual undertones to being possessed. I like that in this one they found a way of making it really harrowing and like really uncomfortable in terms of there's a lot of body contortion, but they were able to kind of veer off of kind of like the sexual element of it. Because for me, there's always that, like, whenever you bring in the sexual element, there is always going to be people who that's going to be dreadfully uncomfortable for, and to the point where like it might take them out of it. Like, I know we're talking about a movie where all kinds of horrible violence is committed on people, but like, I think whenever you bring in that sexual element, for some people it's just going to be an automatic turnoff. So the fact that they're able to work in this very uncomfortable area but veer away from that and still make it as visceral and hard hitting, I think is a really good accomplishment.
Yeah, and I think it's also a balance too, especially in this one, which is a credit to Lee Cronin, who both directed and wrote this, is that you do have children. You have a young child in Cassie. The other two are teens, and so you do have to balance that. And there is kind of understanding, like, what can we show, what can't we show, both from like a audience being comfortable or too uncomfortable, and then of course from a rating perspective. And I think they do balance that out. In some cases, shockingly, I was honestly not expecting them to go as far as they did with the two teenage kids. I figured all the kids were going to be safe. I figured maybe
no
there'd
one
be
is safe in this movie.
Yeah,
that was, I respect that. I so respect that. Like, I was the same way. Like when you see these characters, it's like, well, they're going to have to bring in some cannon fodder or something, because like clearly the core family is going to make it out of this. And boy, was I fucking wrong.
Yeah, and they did that to a degree, but they disposed of those people in the hallway so quickly that they kept the focus on the family.
In that great like doorbell, the door eye hole too point of view, like how you see the action happen, like almost like a video game where it's just like everything just completely falls apart. Like the neighbor that you think, the neighbor who's kind of religious, and you almost think like, is he going to try to perform like an exorcism at some point? Like just horribly dispatched like so quickly, like, no help is coming. And the way that they kind of tie back into that later too, with like the Dead by Dawn chanting and like the taunting and everything, like it was very isolating and really, yeah, way more bleak than I expected, because I also thought that the kids were going to be off limits. Like I thought I thought they would go through the ringer. I thought, there would be some violence and definitely some scars that would come out of it. But like what happens with Danny and Bridget was unexpected, because I really did think that they would make it, and that was not the case. So but I thought it was kind of cool though that you got to see their performances, that duality of like, oh, this is them, before the possession, and then they get to go like full on, go play in Deadite territory, which is kind of cool for them as actors, I'm sure, to be able to go that hard into it.
Yeah, and I mean, and I loved the Fede Alvarez version, but there is a nice humor to all this in the middle of all of these terrible things. There are just a couple scenes like the eyeball going into the mouth.
Oh,
and
yeah.
And the look of the Deadites sometimes when they're like when Ellie's kind of like flying at the screen, there's definitely a little like cheesiness or a little fun that they're having in the middle of all of these terrible things, whether it's eating the glass or of course the scene that everyone's talking about is the cheese grater scene. And that was like, I don't know, that was like what, like a second, 2 seconds. But definitely did what it was supposed to.
And the glass chewing scene,
Ooh.
it started off as something where it's like, it's been done. People they've used that as like the device of like, oh, this person's gone, they're chewing on glass. But to take that extra step of seeing what it's doing when she's swallowing the glass just really put a gory cherry on top of that scene.
Yeah, they did not. Yeah, I appreciated that it did have like the Fede Alvarez level of gore where it really was in your face, it really was visceral, but then it also kind of tied back into the Evil Dead 2 like cheekiness at times, especially with Alyssa Sutherland's performance, where she really like brought out that dark comedy. Like she was so good at being like manipulative and like enjoying terrorizing her children. Like it was such a performance. And I think the movie kind of lives and dies through her performance, and she brought it so above and beyond that there was no doubt that it would work because of everything kind of went through her, and she did such a great job.
And it's kind of funny because I was talking with her the other day and she said she doesn't like watching horror movies, not because she doesn't like horror movies, but because they used to scare her. And now she watches them and appreciates them. And I had mentioned that like, you're going to give people nightmares now. You're safe. You're the scary one. And so, yeah, she really, really, really brought it. There's, like I said, it's just a tremendous performance and not easy, because how many times have we seen a possessed character, go in the corner of the walls and talk with a different voice. But it was the eyes, it was the smile, it was the little subtleties, that made it all great. And yeah, it was really good stuff. And we'll talk about Beth in a little bit more detail, but I was not expecting, and I'll give spoiler warnings again, just because I know we got some folks who just joined us from Twitch. So yes, spoiler warning again for Evil Dead Rise. But yeah, I was not expecting the like boss deadite at the end of the film. When we have them, right? We certainly had it in Evil Dead or in Evil Dead 2, where you had that big creature. And but I was not expecting this like family mashup monster, and that it was really straight from the page of the Necronomicon. So I think that for me was probably one of the coolest surprises and areas where I'm like, oh, I haven't seen that before in Evil Dead. And so I thought that was just a really cool way to escalate, because certainly they didn't really do that in the Fede Alvarez version. Not that they needed to per se, but you want to make your movie kind of stand apart, come with a new thing to add to the canon. And I think doing this was not just really creative visually, but also, again, when you think about how horrific it is, it's like these deadites took this mom and like mangled her up with her kids and turned them into one monster that's setting to attack the last remaining members of their family. And just the thought of it, not even seeing it, is horrifying. But the visuals were cool too.
Yeah. It was a monster mash, like literally. I thought it was great. It kind of reminded
Derek,
me.
how long did you have that one in the show?
Insane.
Yes, I can finally do it. Oh my gosh, dust that one off. It kind of reminded me too of like that short film that Neil Blomkamp had done with like all the limbs together. Like I just love that when like you like you said, it's a good escalation, because like where do you go from here? Because you already had like the mom, you had like all the neighbors in the hallway, like, so where do you go from there? And I thought it was so perfect, especially when you go into like that third act in the parking garage, and they also figure out a way to bring a chainsaw into it. Like, how do we get a chainsaw into an apartment building? Well, someone has their they someone who lives there runs like a tree trimming service. So like it was such a great escalation from both parts, where like Beth gets a chainsaw, the it is like a video game boss that has kind of mutated into this like next form, this like ascension or descension in this case. So it's very interesting how they did that. And it's another thing, I did not expect them to like go that like creature, like cryptid with it. And I really appreciate that they just kind of kept finding ways to keep you on your toes before cutting them off.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was thinking about it as you were talking about it, and I think Ellie and Alyssa Sutherland's performance is probably one of the best deadites in the series.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Obviously, we just saw the movie a month for the two of us, like a month ago, but like we'll see like the if it stands a test of time. I think it will. I mean, it's a great performance, and yeah, and it not only is it a great performance, but she has to be in deadite mode for so much of the movie. Yeah, it's just really incredible. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about Lily Sullivan, who plays Beth. If Alyssa Sutherland is really kind of the driving force on the side of evil or the side of deadites, Lily Sullivan is bringing it just as hard as Beth. If you've been following her on social media, you can see not only how much fun she's had kind of being in that hero role, but how hard she's been working. All the bruises and scrapes she had as she's, fighting these deadites on set, but really putting in the work in terms of in terms of the physicality of this role. And I think as a character, Beth is really interesting as well, because she has a new surprise. She's a mother. She's going to, she recently found out she's pregnant, hoping to go see her sister to kind of talk about this, and now gets put in this situation where her maternal instincts need to kick in, not just to save her unborn child, but to save her niece as well. And so I think from a character, she's in this very interesting, protective situation, and then of course the performance that accompanies it is really, really good too.
Yeah, I think, if you're looking at this as like a hero's trial where she is starting the movie, with that idea of like, I'm pregnant. How am I ever going to handle this? Like, how can I roll with whatever problems come up, and talk about trial by fire? Like, you have to, you have to protect people, not from the usual things that would, be detrimental to a kid. You have to go against these thousands of year old Kandarian demons that will, tear your family apart, both literally and figuratively. And so, yeah, it's an interesting character angle. And I really do love what she does with it. I think the thing that I recognize the most is the way she shows how frayed she's getting at the seams, where her scared face has almost a little bit of a manic smile slash laughter to it, where you can see like she's always like maybe two blinks away from completely having a mental breakdown, where she's almost going to go full like Sally from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where she just starts like laughing maniacally. She looks like she's like a step away from that throughout most of the movie.
That's a
I
good
really
point.
like that approach, that it's just like she's barely holding it together.
It's interesting because we
Yeah.
do see Ash especially in Evil Dead 2, where he cracks, so
Yeah.
we do see that happen. So that's a really, really interesting observation. I think one of the cool things, and we just did that Alien in Resurrection watch party. We were talking about Ripley's journey as a mother, and I think it's interesting that there are definitely some parallels in this film as well. We see that Lee Cronin, he has a lot of influences, and whether it's Evil Dead itself, whether it's The Shining and the elevator scene, and I think in the finale,
Yeah.
this definitely like has the spirit of Aliens in it while doing its own thing. We have Beth, doing everything she can to protect Cassie, but there are some direct nods to Alien, kind of where you see the creature kind of like coming out through the grate on the ceiling, and some other things too, where you see like Cassie hiding, kind of like Newt would be from the Alien Queen. And so I thought that was cool, because of course I love aliens, so I'm a sucker for that. It's Alien Day.
Right. Yeah, there was some really good direct homages to that. I would say it was. I was almost expecting her to say the power loader aliens line in the climax, because it
Yeah.
was. I'm like, at this point, because there had been so many homages, and it was still very much doing its own thing. But it's like, well, we have an elevator here. What do we want to do with it? And we've got blood, so why not do a Shining homage? And then we've got this kind of fight in the parking garage, where it kind of is just naturally reminiscent of these iconic horror movie scenes. And I thought it was it was really fun how they played with the environment of the high rise. And it was I when they first announced it, I kind of expected it to deal kind of more with the building as a whole, like the neighbors and things like that. But I kind of like how they kept it more contained. I think it's a little more claustrophobic that way, and things like that. So, and it still incorporates, it's more about like this floor of neighbors. So I thought they did a good job of kind of explaining how there is no escape essentially from that point of view. But yeah, there's some really good homages in there, while still kind of mixing it up too.
Yeah, I'll say that this definitely went in directions I wasn't expecting it to. To your point, because it was in a high rise, I did expect it to be more of a sprawling story. The fact that it wasn't isn't a problem. It's just that this movie definitely defied expectations that maybe you'd have for it. I think another big one for me is how the movie concludes. And again, I'm just throwing a spoiler warning because I know we have people who are listening. So, at the end of Evil Dead Rise, kind of like I mentioned, everybody said, or the Deadites are like, dead by dawn. I think one of the cool things about them is you do not survive them, right? You can't say that Ash had like a good life. And in the first, movie, you could say they won In the second one, they sent him back. And then depending on your, if you watch the special edition or director's cut of 3, he gets thrown into basically a wasteland in time. And even at the end of the TV series, again, he's just always fighting these. He is kind of like Ripley in that he just doesn't stop. And I think that right now, Beth and Cassie are a little safe. So if I had one qualm with the movie, it's that, well, the Deadites always win, but did they really, like, they didn't get them. There was no tease that they will go after them. That being said, I will fully say that, if they're going to sequelize this, and Lee Cronin has already said one option is to just follow up with them. And I think that makes a lot of sense. You have these great characters. You're probably going to want to put them through, something else again, put them in a different setting and see what happens. Of course, there are other places that this series could go, but I just feel like Beth is such a strong character. We have, she's going to be giving birth. We have Cassie. There's probably other family members. So I feel like, this story can and will continue.
Yeah, I read, I think it was an interview with Variety where Lee Cronin was kind of running down like where he could, because he wants to be involved. He wants to do future installments, and he was kind of thinking of like the next movie, and he said like one idea, well, like you mentioned, there's definitely Cassie and Beth. He said he had thought about what happens when the cleanup crew shows up to the apartment complex.
I read that one.
He said following up or kind of exploring what's on the recording of the vinyl that Beth's listening to. He said that was very intentional, like the whole story that they laid out with the priests and everything. And then also he said just going like how we see that wraparound story of it going back to the cabin, how he would love to do, he loved doing something different with the high rise, but how he would also love to do an Evil Dead movie in the cabin and kind of do his version of that, which even though I love the new setting, after seeing what he did with the high rise, I kind of want to see like how he would subvert the cabin. Like, and I think with Airbnbs and glamping and all that, I think there's a lot you can play with the cabin nowadays that maybe you couldn't have done in the past. So I think there's definitely some intriguing elements there. But we also have too the dad character that kind of ran out on the family. Like if you were to follow up with Beth and Cass, maybe we see this like, this guy that maybe he's grief stricken or he's just, I don't know, maybe he's just a douchebag. I don't know, but he, you could incorporate that character into the story. So there's just so many. It's such an exciting kind of time because we don't really know what direction they're going to go in right now. But I'm excited to see whatever they do. I'm excited to see where they go next.
Because I do feel like the one, with the subversion of expectations, one of the things I think they did subvert was putting it in this urban setting. I think for me, there's an expectation that they're going to like blow this thing wider open and turn it into something where it's like the stakes are higher and more people are at risk. And they definitely didn't do that. They kept it isolated, which on one side I think was a good idea because I don't know, you can run the risk of, I think if you try and make a story like this too big, it might lose some of its potency. Where if you try and make it like this, like citywide thing, like how do you do that? And also, like, do you have anywhere near the budget to do something where it turns into a citywide thing? So if you try and do that and you don't have the capabilities of doing that, either like storytelling wise, or if you don't have the resources to pull it off the right way, that can really backfire. So on one hand, I'm glad that they subverted that. On the other hand, like I feel like there's a lot of potential still there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the good news for Evil Dead fans is that this movie made a killing at the box office. The budget was only, I say only, but it was only 20 million or under. I don't have an exact figure, but 15 to 20 million was the estimate. And of course, marketing on top of that. But that being said, it already made more than 40 million. By the time you're listening to this, it'll probably be at 50, 60. And so this was a good return on investment for Warner Brothers and for producers Sam Raimi and Rob Tappert and Bruce Campbell. And so, Bruce had talked about the fact that, we may see, if this were successful, which it is, we'll see more Evil Dead movies more often. So instead of every 10 years, maybe we'll get every 2 or 3. And if that's the case, you can't have it at the cabin every 2 or 3 years. I mean, you could, but I don't expect that. So I do think we're going to see maybe more of the characters from this film. I would like to see Mia come back. So
right, I really want to
yeah.
see Jane Levy back
Yep.
in the back in the mix.
Definitely.
Yeah, so we definitely have options there. But yeah, I think there is much more Evil Dead, and I was very happy that this was another solid installment. Before we wrap up, because I'm always curious about your rankings, and I didn't ask you ahead of time, so it's just going to be whatever you think. What do you call it? Right now, in the moment. Brian, how would you rank the Evil Dead films?
Ooh, all of the okay.
Oh wait, I'm going to change it. I'm going to change it.
TV
First of all,
series too, or just the movies?
We'll do the TV series. First of all, what would you give this out of what we're doing? Out of 5? I never remember, Derek. We're doing out of 5.
Oh yeah.
Or are we? Yeah, okay. I think so. Out of 5.
Yeah, no,
we've done
5.
10 and 5.
I've done mostly 5 out of 5. So
okay.
That's what we do on Daily Dead. So
I will say, I am going to go 3.75. I can't quite give it a 4.
Ooh.
Only because I need more time with it. I need to see it again and
that's fair.
Do I have as much fun with this? Like for me, sometimes a rating is like, do I think the rewatchability is going to work?
Yeah, that's fair.
So I almost wanted to say 4. I'm going to say 3.75 chainsaws out of 5. Really, really solid entry. A second viewing could bring it up even further, but I don't want to commit yet.
Okay, Derek, how about you?
I definitely am on board with Brian. I think I feel good enough about it to give it a 4. I guess I have had a little time to let it marinate, and I think it's a pretty solid 4 out of 5 chainsaws. Although, yeah, this also makes me think about my ranking too for the entire franchise.
I don't know how the hell I'm going to do that, but yeah.
I'm going to give this. I'll give this 4 out of 5 Necronomicons. And I gave it a little more. I had given it. I looked at my older score. I was cheating. I looked at. I had given it a 7, but I feel better about this. I really enjoyed it when I saw it, but I like it more the more I've had time with it.
Yeah, that's a good sign, right? Because sometimes it's hard to like rank it right away. Like you really have to let it digest a little bit. Yeah,
and of course these could change. Rarely does my number go down. Usually it's that's a lie. That's a lie. No, usually after the first month, I'll say. Sometimes I'll go see a movie and I'll be like, "Oh yeah, that was so good," and then like the next I'll be like, "No, it wasn't." And then my ranking will keep going down. But I mean, after like it's been a month or two, or I've seen it a couple times. Usually, it stays where it's at.
Or in the case of Alien Resurrection, it takes like 25 years, and you start to come around on it.
Yeah, that's different. Okay, it was just a lie from me. Not Alien Resurrection. I did enjoy it more than the first time I saw it.
Just gotta let it marinate a little bit.
Yeah. Okay, Brian, your rankings. Put me on the spot.
Bastard, making me go first. Okay. I'm going to go 2 Army of Darkness, 1 remake Evil Dead Rise. And I don't say that as a knock on Evil Dead Rise.
What about the TV show?
I don't know if I'm qualified because I didn't see the 3rd season.
Not qualified.
Yeah. I don't get to talk of things of which I don't know.
Derek, what do you got?
And I also did not quite finish the series, so I'll probably have to keep that out of my final ranking for now. But I did enjoy it though, so I will say that. But I will go The Evil Dead #1, even though there's that scene that I wish they had handled differently. But to me, because it's kind of Ash before Ash was Ash, like it just feels really horrifying and dangerous, and nobody is safe. And it just really freaks me out the most out of any of them. So I would go The Evil Dead #1, Evil Dead 2 #2. This is like Screamer. I'm just going
counting to 5. Yeah.
Then I think I would go Evil Dead 2013 3, Army of Darkness number 4, Evil Dead Rise number 5, and again, and I did the same thing with Scream 6, or it was like second to last. It's not because I don't like it; it's just because, well, one, I've lived with these other movies longer, but I just feel like they're all solid. It's just
the others are such classics. Like these are all such good movies that it's like I feel bad doing these rankings at the end because of how how effusively we've been talking about
that's
this.
Why
and I've been like dead last.
That's why I asked about it.
I love the movie. It's just apparently it's my least favorite Evil Dead movie, which doesn't make any sense if you've been listening the last hour. But here we are.
I think it says more about how much we like the other Evil Dead movies than it does about how much we like this.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say Evil Dead 2. Evil Dead 2013.
Ooh.
I know. I really, really like that.
It's really up there.
I'll die for it.
Up there a little high? No.
The Evil Dead, because it's the first. It's got to be higher up.
See, it's
Army of Darkness, Evil Dead Rise, the TV show.
Oh, we're horrible.
I'm sure we've just broken Lee Cronin's heart.
No, this is not true. This is not true. This is not true at all. We had nothing but great things to say about this one. And I put it above the TV show. And I've seen all 3.
Oh. Okay, so
I do think
it's not last on your list.
I think an issue with the TV show from the seasons I saw is because you're dragging it out more, there's more chance for like the need for filler, and it's not as potent, I think, as so there's some really great moments in the TV show, but I can see, Jonathan, where like compared to the movies that are just all just these distilled shots of gory, like anarchy, chaotic horror, there's just more space for missteps in the show than in the movies. Yeah,
it's a totally different beast. I mean, there's more Ash versus Evil Dead TV show time than there is all the movies combined. Mm-hmm. I think the first 2 seasons are really solid. There were some creative changes, and I think that resulted in it being a little disjointed, kind of like what we just talked about for Alien Resurrection. And I think third season doesn't completely stick the landing. It's still good. I mean, it's great, like I said, and it's nice to see Bruce Campbell back as Ash. But those are my rankings, and so I'm saying that Evil Dead Rise is better. I rank it better than like dozens of hours of Evil Dead TV show. So I redeemed us.
Trying to salvage your rating.
I redeemed us. Okay, well, with that said, we this episode has come to an end. We are very happy to have had any of you hanging out on the Twitch stream. I know we saw some people coming in and out, so thank you for watching. This will be our Friday episode, so if you tune in every Friday, you'd be like, well, I don't need to listen to this one because I just saw it live. We wanted to experiment with this, and if you're listening to this, and I see. Hey everybody. And if you do see this and you're like, or you're listening to this and you're like, hey, like I would like to do, or be part of more of these, I think we're going to experiment with this a little bit more. We'll get more people in. We'll do some more live episodes because this is basically it, right? It's just the 3 of us talking. And if we get some more audience participation, we'll throw it in there. And I think it would be a lot of fun. So I hope everyone enjoyed it who was listening on Twitch or watching on Twitch. For everybody that listens afterwards, like I said, we'll get you in the next one. We want to thank Bryan, our engineer, not Bryan Christopher, Bryan Smith, for helping us out each and every episode. I don't want to thank Bryan.
I feel like you didn't have to distinguish that. That was kind of mean-spirited, but that's fine. That's cool. That's cool.
And as always, we want to thank our listeners and our Twitch watchers, including those of you who have signed up for a Corpse Club membership. Head over to corpseclub.com. You can check out all of our episodes. We're also on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, and all of your favorite podcast providers. If you want to get in touch, we're contact@corpseclub.com. Reach out anytime. Also Twitter @Daily Dead News and @Corpse Club. Instagram and Facebook, we're under Corpse Club and Daily Dead as well. Thanks again for listening. And until next time, stay scary.